Okay, for this video, we are going to be making a stamp to make a print. And one of the easiest ways to make a print is if you are to use a piece of cardboard, so any piece of cardboard, an old box. If you don't have that, other things that are thicker or that are just a little bit sturdy will also work. What you'll do is you're going to make some type of a pattern on your cardboard, and you're going to be using just plain old Elmer's glue and some extra cardboard. And the idea is you're going to cut some interesting variations in shapes. So for example, it could be as simple as triangles, lines, just something that has space in between so that when you go to stamp it, it is going to show up. So like obviously it'll have another layer, so kind of like this. You want to use up as much space as you have, and the more intricate your details and design, the better it's going to look in the end. Otherwise, sometimes it's kind of hard to tell what it is. And then all you need to do is glue down each of the pieces and then wait for them to dry. So I did one already, and so here's one, just a simple pattern that I did earlier. Now what you're going to do is when it comes time to print this, the idea is it's going to be flipped over, and so you're going to see just the high points of this stamp. Now, printing is one of those things where practice makes perfect. The idea is that you need to have two really nice finished prints that you are handing in. Now, nice prints are ones that are clear, that don't have like smudgy things around it, that everything looks like it's filled in. So what you're going to do is, I'm just going to use paint. You can use ink, you can use other things too. I'm going to just take my brush and I'm going to paint over those spots, and I'm going to kind of do it fast with kind of a lot of paint. Otherwise, sometimes it dries too quick, and then you won't be able to get your print. In class, a lot of times we're going to use what's called a brayer, which is a roller. So if you have a roller, sometimes that works better too. But even on here, if you can see, my paint is drying pretty quick. So I'm going to try to get it on here fast. And then normally when you stamp, you flip it over. But on this one, I'm going to put the paper right on top of it. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to push down. Usually when you do it this way, you can see a little bit of like what you've hit on the paper and see if you've missed anything. This one I just kind of like to rub all the edges. And then when you're done, you slowly take the paper up, and then you'll be able to see your print. Now when I look at this print, obviously it's not perfect. I see like spots here that didn't get. I must not have put enough paint in some of these other locations. This one looks pretty good. So that would be my test print. So what I'm going to do then is just take that and set it aside, and then I'm going to take my print and go over it with paint again, and this time I'm going to try to pay attention to where I missed paint last time. So I'm going to put a lot more paint on here. Now if you get some in the background of it, that's fine. Usually it's not going to do anything to it. You can use different colors as well. The only problem is, like I said, you got to have everything planned out and go really fast, because if it dries too quickly, it's not going to work. Okay, so I'm going to try this one. Okay, I'm going to rub over top. Now, depending on the paint, I'm using acrylic paint, but other types of paint sometimes work better. Okay, so if you can kind of see the pattern through there. Now that print, some spots were better and some were not so great. So it looks like obviously some of the spots had smudged or I moved the things around. So the idea is when you look at this, I can take paper towel, or I'm going to take a Kleenex, and I'm going to wipe off some of this excess so that maybe next time when I go to do it, those parts aren't going to be on there. Okay? So I'm going to try this one more time. The idea is to keep doing it until you get some really nice prints. Now sometimes, just because of the pattern or the materials you're using, you might not get a really great print. I mean, unfortunately, that's the case. However, the idea is to know how to do it so that you could recreate it if you needed to. So for example, I could make prints of all kinds of things. The reason that people made prints was because back in the olden days, it was really hard to make recreations of things because they would have to redraw them. They didn't have printers and all the really cool stuff we have now. So they would make prints as their printer, and then they would be able to copy it over and over again. Okay, we're going to try this one. Okay, so this one's a little bit better. Now, depending on the material and the paint, because the paint's drying so quickly, this is probably going to be about as close to what as I'm going to get as a good print. But the idea is to not have any smudges, to make sure you can see where everything is in the picture. And usually the first print, even though this one still looks a little questionable, you can always take paint and you can add in to those spots if it really bothers you, if you can't get a good print. But the idea though is you don't want to have the smudges. You want to make sure that they're really clear. So this one's probably my worst out of all of them. This one's a little bit clearer. The other thing too is if you notice when you're doing this, like if something on your stamp, like I noticed this is like really like close and this is kind of far out, you can take these off and you can adjust them so that you can have a different look. But the idea is once you get your prints, you're going to cut them out, and I usually just cut them out in a square. And then when you cut them out, what you're going to do is you're going to mount them on another piece of paper. Now, if you have another color piece of paper, it will be helpful. It'll be a lot easier to see. So if I have a black sheet of paper, I could take and I could mat it on that piece of paper. So I do one here, and then I could cut out the other one and I could put it here. And then that way when you go to take your picture to submit it into Schoology, they're both on one sheet and it's very easy to see. Sometimes when it's just in a big pool of white paper, it's really hard to see. So if you have another color piece of paper to mount it on, that's usually most helpful. And then just make sure too that you do it neatly. So don't like put them like this way and then have them like overlapping. So try to make them as nice and neat as possible.